Every WW2 Admiral ranked, from junk to legend. Today we're ranking the most consequential admirals of the Second World War. From the Italian commander whose fleet fled a British attack in port, to the American five-star fleet admiral who outthought, outproduced, and outfought the Imperial Japanese Navy across the largest ocean on Earth. A note before we begin. Naval command in the Second World War was the most complex form of military leadership ever practiced. An admiral commanded ships across thousands of miles of ocean, coordinated aircraft, submarines, and marines, made decisions in minutes that determined the fate of tens of thousands of sailors, and lived with the results for the rest of his life. Some of these men rose to the moment. Others broke under it. This ranking is based on what they achieved in command. Comments will be open at the end. Bring your arguments. D tier, the worst. The admirals whose failures define naval disasters. Rank 8. Inigo Campione, Italy. Let's start at the bottom. Admiral Inigo Campione commanded the Italian battle fleet during the opening years of the Second World War, and his tenure was defined by one of the most humiliating naval defeats in modern history. Picture this. It is the night of the 11th of November, 1940. The Italian fleet, 6 battleships strong, is anchored in the harbor of Taranto in southern Italy. The Italian Navy has more battleships in service than the entire Royal Navy Mediterranean fleet. On paper, Italy dominates the Mediterranean. That night, 21 obsolete British ferry Swordfish biplanes flew from the aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious, attacked Taranto harbor, and in a single strike disabled 3 Italian battleships. The Italian fleet lost half its capital ships in a single night to canvas and wire aircraft. Campione's response was inadequate before, during, and after the raid. The harbor's defenses were poorly prepared. The response to the initial contact was slow. The subsequent Italian naval strategy became one of harbor-bound caution, hoarding the surviving battleships as a fleet, in being, rather than risking them in operations. Campione was quietly moved to a governorship role afterwards and was executed by the Germans in 1944 after Italy switched sides, an admiral in command of a fleet that never learned how to use its own strength. Rank 7. Ernst Lindemann, Germany. Now this one requires a note. Lindemann was captain of the battleship Bismarck, not technically an admiral, but he is included because his commander during the operation, Admiral Günther Lütjens, is the actual target of this ranking, and Lütjens' decisions defined the disaster of the Bismarck operation. Let us correct that. Rank 7 is Günther Lütjens. Admiral Lütjens commanded the fleet Operation Rheinübung in May 1941, in which the battleship Bismarck and heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen sortied into the North Atlantic to attack Allied convoys. The operation was a strategic failure of the first order. Lütjens' decisions throughout the 8-day cruise, from failing to refuel from a supply ship before combat, to broadcasting a long radio message that allowed the Royal Navy to locate the Bismarck after she had lost contact, to attempting to reach French ports rather than doubling back into the safer Arctic, contributed directly to the sinking of one of Germany's 2 most valuable warships and the death of over 2,000 German sailors. Lütjens went down with the Bismarck on the 27th of May 1941, an admiral whose fatal caution and communication mistakes destroyed a strategic asset Germany could not replace. C tier, the flawed. Admirals who won some victories but lost the decisive battles. Rank 6. William Halsey, United States. Bull Halsey. The most aggressive American admiral of the war, and one of the most controversial. William Halsey commanded the 3rd United States Fleet during the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944, the largest naval battle in human history. Halsey's mission was to protect the American amphibious landings in the Philippines. His fleet included the fast carriers and the modern battleships that gave the American Navy its offensive punch. When a Japanese carrier force appeared to the north of the battle area, Halsey took his entire fleet north to attack it, leaving the vulnerable landing beaches uncovered. The Japanese carrier force was a decoy. Its aircraft complement had been mostly stripped for other operations. While Halsey chased the decoy, the Japanese battleship force under Admiral Kurita broke through the San Bernardino Strait and nearly reached the American landing beaches. Only the desperate courage of Taffy III, a group of American escort carriers and destroyers, prevented a potential catastrophe at Samar. Halsey was also famous for driving his fleet into 2 typhoons during 1944 and 1945 that sank American destroyers and killed hundreds of sailors, decisions later judged as poor seamanship by naval boards of inquiry. Halsey was brave, aggressive, and beloved by the American press. He was also, at the decisive moment of the greatest naval battle in history, out of position, an admiral whose reputation exceeded his judgment. Rank 5. Andrew Cunningham, Britain. The Mediterranean Lion. Andrew Cunningham commanded the Royal Navy Mediterranean Fleet from 1939 to 1942 and defeated the Italian Navy in engagement after engagement. His victories at Taranto, at Cape Matapan in March 1941, and in numerous convoy actions kept the British Mediterranean supply lines open during the darkest years of the war. Cunningham was aggressive, decisive, and personally admired by his sailors. So why is he only at number 5? Because his tenure also included the naval catastrophe at Crete in May 1941, in which the German air assault on the island cost the Royal Navy 3 cruisers and 6 destroyers sunk, and dozens more damaged. Cunningham later admitted that he had underestimated the threat of shore-based air power against surface ships. It was a mistake that cost thousands of sailors' lives. Cunningham became First Sea Lord in 1943 and served through the end of the war, a magnificent surface fleet commander whose one great error came at a moment when the Royal Navy could least afford it. B tier. The capable admirals who executed the plans that won the war. Rank 4. Karl Dönitz, Germany. The submarine admiral. Karl Dönitz commanded the German U-boat force from 1939 to 1943 and became Grand Admiral and head of the entire German Navy after that. Dönitz's wolf-pack tactics in the Battle of the Atlantic came within a genuine margin of severing British transatlantic supply lines in 1942 and early 1943. His U-boats sank over 14 million tons of Allied shipping. Winston Churchill later wrote that the only thing that truly frightened him during the war was the U-boat peril. So why is Dönitz not higher? Because he ultimately lost the Battle of the Atlantic. The introduction of Allied convoy air cover, long-range escort aircraft, improved radar, code-breaking of the Enigma system, and mass production of escort vessels destroyed the U-boat arm by May 1943. 75% of German U-boat crews died during the war, the highest casualty rate of any major military force in the entire conflict. Dönitz was named Hitler's successor in the final days of the war, negotiated the German surrender, and was sentenced to 10 years in prison at Nuremberg. A brilliant tactical commander who fought the naval campaign Germany could not win with the tools he had. Rank 3. Raymond Spruance, United States. The thinking admiral. Raymond Spruance commanded American carrier forces at the Battle of Midway in June 1942, the single most decisive naval battle of the Pacific War. Given tactical command by the ill Admiral Halsey, Spruance made the decisions in the crucial hours of the 4th of June that resulted in the sinking of 4 Japanese fleet carriers, the destruction of hundreds of trained Japanese naval aviators, and the permanent reversal of the strategic balance in the Pacific. Spruance was quiet, methodical, and famously cerebral. He read Latin and Greek in his cabin. He rarely raised his voice. He was, by every account, the antithesis of the aggressive naval personality embodied by his colleague Halsey. Spruance went on to command the 5th United States Fleet in the Marianas Campaign, the Philippine Sea, and the Iwo Jima and Okinawa operations. He never lost a battle. He never wasted a life he did not have to. He was, in the professional judgment of the U.S. Navy that followed him, the finest fighting admiral America produced during the war. A commander whose intellect was as sharp as any weapon in his fleet. A tier, the elite. Rank 2. Isoroku Yamamoto, Japan. The reluctant warrior. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto commanded the Imperial Japanese Combined Fleet from 1939 until his death in April 1943. Yamamoto had studied at Harvard, served as naval attaché in Washington, and understood American industrial capacity better than almost any Japanese officer. He opposed war with the United States and warned Emperor Hirohito that Japan could not win a prolonged conflict. When the war came anyway, Yamamoto planned and commanded the attack on Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 1941, the most successful surprise naval attack in modern history. He commanded Japanese fleet operations across the entire first year of the Pacific War, including the sinking of the British Force Z and the campaigns in the Dutch East Indies. His defeat at Midway in June 1942 was the beginning of the end for Japanese naval power. Yamamoto was killed in April 1943 when American P-38 Lightning fighters, acting on intercepted Japanese communications, ambushed his transport aircraft over Bougainville. He knew, before the war started, that he could probably win victories for 6 months, perhaps a year, but that after that the American industrial machine would grind the Imperial Japanese Navy into scrap metal. He was right. A brilliant commander who fought a war he believed his country could not win, and did so with more skill than his enemies expected. S tier. Legendary. The admiral who commanded the largest naval force in human history. Rank 1. Chester W. Nimitz, United States. And now we arrive at the top. Fleet Admiral Chester William Nimitz commanded the United States Pacific Fleet and Pacific Ocean areas from December 1941 until the Japanese surrender on the 2nd of September 1945. When Nimitz took command, 16 days after Pearl Harbor, most of the American battle line lay on the bottom of Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese Navy dominated the entire Western Pacific. When he finished, the American Navy was the largest and most powerful naval force ever assembled in human history, and the Japanese fleet had ceased to exist as an operational force. In between, Nimitz coordinated the strategic decisions that led to Midway, Guadalcanal, the Marianas, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. He selected the commanders. He allocated the carriers, the Marines, the submarines, and the amphibious forces across a theater of operations larger than the entire land surface of Africa. He balanced the aggressive personality of Halsey against the methodical intellect of Spruance, using each where each would do the most damage. He resisted political pressure from Washington and from General Douglas MacArthur, and he made the strategic decisions that shortened the Pacific War by an unknown but significant number of months. Nimitz signed the Japanese Instrument of Surrender on the deck of the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay on the 2nd of September 1945, ending the Second World War. He was universally respected by the men who served under him, universally admired by the enemies he defeated, and universally credited by naval historians as the finest theater naval commander in history. Nimitz earns the top tier not through any single battle, but through the sustained mastery of the most complex naval command ever exercised, a quiet Texan who never raised his voice and who broke an empire. That is the ranking. From Inigo Campione, an admiral whose fleet lost half its battleships in a single night, to Chester Nimitz, the fleet admiral who commanded the destruction of an empire across 10,000 miles of ocean. If you enjoyed this video, the one on screen now is for you. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell us in the comments which admiral you would have ranked differently. We read every single one.